Welcome back to Essentials. Glad to have you with us today. I know last week Marjorie told us the account of that incredible sermon on Delta Airlines, Sermon on the Plane, right? Okay. First thing, you can't take yourselves too seriously in these discussions. I thought that was great. Anyway, Sermon on the Plane, and we're moving forward, chapters 7 through 9. So, Colin, what's happening in these chapters as we go forward?
Well, in these chapters 7, 8, and 9, we're still in Galilee, and a reminder that Galilee is home turf for Jesus. This is where you find Nazareth, Capernaum. It's where he's from. So he's still in this area, and Luke here is really, in these chapters, trying to get us to see that Jesus is the Messiah. And he's doing that through Jesus' teaching and then stories of healing.
Okay. Well, now today we are going to focus a little bit more on chapter 7. What are we going to look at?
Well, we are looking at one of the great stories in Luke. It's a story full of the gospel message. And it's the story of Jesus being invited to Simon's house. Simon was a Pharisee. We don't really know why Simon invited Jesus to his home. Was he curious to learn about Jesus? Was he trying to bait Jesus and trap him? We don't know. Jesus shows up at his house. We do know that he recognizes Jesus as a rabbi. He calls him that. But he doesn't meet him with the respect that one would expect. Doesn't meet him with a holy kiss or a washing his feet with water or oil for his head. Now, Simon's house, it's helpful to realize his house probably would have been in a little square formation with a courtyard in the center. So Jesus comes over for dinner. And at that time, when a famous rabbi came to someone's house, it was open to the whole community. They wouldn't eat, but they would come into the courtyard to listen. And what we're told is that a woman shows up. She's not there to eat again. She's just there to listen. We're told that she is a sinner, which is, most scholars say, a euphemism for a prostitute.
Wow. So this really is a case of guess who's coming to dinner,
right,
in a way.
Right.
So she's there. What happens next?
So she has obviously had some type of experience with Jesus in the past. We're not told about this, but it must have been a transformative experience for her, encountering his love and grace for her. Jesus is at the dinner. He's reclined. You wouldn't sit at tables in those days. You would recline on one side. So she steps up from the courtyard, goes to his feet. She lets down her hair, begins to bathe Jesus' feet with her tears. She dries his feet with her hair, and then begins to kiss his feet and anoint them with oil. Now, this was a scandalous thing to do, and scholars argue it was a very, very erotic thing to do. And we're told Simon's watching all this, and he's judging Jesus in his heart, and he's saying to himself, this man definitely cannot be a prophet. Now, Jesus knows this, and that then opens up the opportunity for Jesus to begin to teach.
Wow. Well, it reminds me, listening to you talk, of something that you and David talked about in the introduction, which is understanding something of the culture and the context. And while we may not understand everything there, just imagining if this happened today at somebody's dinner, how we might react. So what do we see? How does Jesus react to this?
Well, Jesus begins to teach, and he really teaches us, I think, a profound thing. What he does is he teaches us through a series of kind of a little parable and then direct confrontation with Simon, that there is a correlation between love and forgiveness. So when you have little devotion, when you have little love, that's a pretty good sign that there's little depth of forgiveness. So looking at the story, what you have is you got Simon. Simon believes he's a good man, believes that he is living a righteous life in the sight of others and in the sight of God. And so he doesn't feel like he needs any forgiveness, doesn't need any really grace, and therefore he doesn't have a lot of love. Love for others, definitely for this prostitute, Jesus, and not even, it appears, love for God. The woman, on the other hand, is conscious of one thing, and that is her burning need for forgiveness and grace. And therefore, she is overwhelmed with love for the one who can supply it, and that's Jesus. In other words, what he's telling us is one of the key things that shuts us off from a loving relationship with God is a sense of self-sufficiency. And it's not that God doesn't love us if we feel self-sufficient. It's that we can't access or open ourselves up to God's love, which is always there for us. I've heard said before that the greatest sin is to be conscious of no sin. And I think there's some truth there, because again, when we're not conscious of our own need for forgiveness, we don't even know to open the door to allow God's forgiveness to come into our heart and transform us.
Wow, yeah. So this this truth, this connection of grace and love and forgiveness, it actually plays itself out in our relationships, doesn't it?
It does. I think, like all deep truths, it's very broad. So think about a marriage. I think about my own marriage. In a marriage, if you don't recognize how you're falling short, if you're not recognizing the need for grace that you need from your spouse and that you receive from your spouse, if you're not aware of this, then your love's going to be pretty shallow. And it's true with friendships and with family. If we enter into those relationships arrogantly, pridefully, unable to be honest about our own failings, then we're not able to receive the love they have for us in the midst of those failings. And that's really, that's the profound experience of love, to know that you're loved despite your weaknesses.
So true. I love how you brought this into our own experience in relationships, because for some of us, maybe all of us, things of Scripture can become abstract, but when you talk about our own relationships and that need for forgiveness, it really comes home. It makes me think of C.S. Lewis. Someone else may have said it too, but he said, to be Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. And wow, I know that's true in my life. So it's made me think of that. Well, as we wrap up, any other things you want to kind of talk about?
Well, one thing I'll just note how this whole exchange ends. We said in the introductory to this lesson that Luke is trying to get us to see that Jesus is the Messiah. He's showing that through different ways. And this story ends with Jesus telling the woman her sins are forgiven, which prompts the question, who is this man, right? Who can say this? Who can forgive sins? And of course, what Luke wants us to see is, well, it's the Messiah who can do this. This is the one who comes to do the will of God, which is to share the infinite love and grace of God with the world.
So much in there. The King, the Messiah, the Creator, coming to offer us goodness and love and forgiveness. I hope that sparks some really rich conversations in your groups this week, and we look forward to being with you next time.